Welcome to tonight's show. Tonight we're going to talk about recent cruise news that's important to people that like to cruise. We've had news today from Royal Caribbean, from NCL, from Virgin Voyages, and then there was a couple of small cruise lines. Oh, I forgot Celebrity. Celebrity had news out today too. And so I wanted to go through and talk about the changes that are coming and how they're going to impact us. And again, a little bit more about what we know about the future of cruising. As we get these announcements come in, it seems like on a steady stream lately, I think that we can start to derive some information that really helps us get a better picture of what to expect. And the one thing I would say right now is up front is I'm probably not buying any airline tickets to meet a cruise right now. But we'll talk about the why. If we're meeting for the first time, my name's Ken Edmonds, and on this channel, I provide tips and tricks to help people that travel with disabilities to do so easier. I also provide news in general, cruise news, to keep people informed about what's going on. Let me pop up my slide deck here. Give me a second. Okay. So in today's news, we'll start off with NCL. Their big announcement was today is that they've basically canceled all cruises through the end of July. So anything that was booked in as a July sailing date has now been canceled. And that puts Carnival, NCL, and we'll find another one that are all starting, at least claim to be starting at the same time. It's interesting, and I talked about this in Cruise News earlier this week, is that Frank Del Rio, who is the CEO of NCL, did not give any specifics about what ships and what ports. He just said that when they start back, it'll be a few ships at a time. He also talked about the fact that it's quite possible that onboard ships, that there are going to be some changes, including possibly needing to wear masks, social distancing, sailing at less than full capacity. All of these things in the event that there's still that coronavirus is not under control, I guess would be the best way to say it. And of course, those things are important because they're going to impact the onboard experience to some extent. Hi, Pam. Nice to have you with us today. So we think about it. Just a good example of that is they're going to quite probably spread out the space in the dining room, so there won't be as many people eating in the dining room at one time. On one of the cruise lines, I saw a notice that they're going to actually use an electronic menu. They're not going to have paper menus, or if you want a paper menu, they're going to be one-time use menus. They'll throw them away when they're done. Of course, for me, I'd be okay with that because I'd like to have some to scan and post in my blog and share with people. But all of these things are going to change our experience. Somebody asked the other day about what do you do for maintaining social distance when the halls are so tight. And the first thought that popped into my mind is one-way traffic. That whichever way you're going, you can only go one direction in a hallway. So one goes forward, one goes aft, and then when you're crossing back and forth between, maybe they both go the same direction. I'm not really sure. But if social distancing is important, that's one of those things that they have to address. And it was interesting, Mr. Bain today in his discussion from Royal Caribbean made the point that all of the cruise lines are working together to try to come up with a common set of standards. They're working with the CDC and with CLIA to try to put together a plan so that when they get back, that they'll be able to take care of issues that arise. So, again, there was encouraging news, but nothing's going to happen right away. I kind of touched on this a little bit, but they're probably not going to sail the ships full. Part of it is right now, there's very few staff left in the U.S. and in the near U.S. waters. I showed a slide on Monday night where they had 20 ships trying to offload crew members in Manila Harbor, in Manila Bay, but it's the port of Manila. And the interesting thing is they got there and they wouldn't let them off. They had the same problem that there was a ship that was going to Jamaica full of people from Jamaica to repatriate them, and it took them 3 or 4 days to get permission for those people to get off the ship in Jamaica. So these kinds of things, don't bode well for even for August, I'm sad to say, because once people get home, they're going to have to get staff back to get them on board, to get the ships up and running. And so there'll probably be some training issues and several things that they'll have to work through as they start to ramp up the cruising. The fact that NCL didn't give us any idea about what the itineraries are going to look like or what ports they're going to sail from leads me to believe, since he did say anything that they would start with 5 ships, that they don't know the answer to those questions. And again, if they don't know the answer to those questions, it makes it unlikely that we're going to be ready to sail in 2 months. I mean, it's possible they'll get the details worked out. It's possible the CDC order will get lifted. But I have questions about that. There's just so many challenges still in existence. One of the things that came up in both conference calls I listened to lately was they're talking about the challenges they've had in trying to process refunds. They're working as hard as they can on it, but all of the cruise lines, at least all of the major cruise lines, have laid off significant numbers of staff. And so you've got a tremendous workload coming in because they're having to rebook, issue credits, and issue refunds. And on top of that, they have fewer people to do it. So it's definitely expanding the time frame to get those refunds out. Now, I wish I could say, hey, they've got a magic pill they're going to take and be able to get it done right away. I think we can expect to see that. And I'm still waiting on refunds for an April cruise and waiting on extra onboard credit for a June cruise. So I'm in the same place everybody else is, and it doesn't do a lot of good to call them, raise Cain. They're working on them as fast as they can. So I don't know. I wish I had better news, but I don't. I would say too that one of the reasons that they've been canceling the 1 month at a time, I'm fairly confident, is that they're trying to manage that workload. Because imagine what it would have been like if they'd have canceled the 5 months of cruises all at once. It would just made it that much more difficult to get everything processed. So that's a piece of it. And one other issue that's going to affect all of the cruise lines is right now there's 13 states, I believe, that have quarantine requirements depending on where you're traveling from. And some of these require 2 weeks of quarantine. So if you go, I think Florida is one of them. So like go from New York City to Florida. When you get to Florida, you have to spend 2 weeks in a hotel, can't leave. That's a challenge, so that means if you're going on a 1 week cruise out of Florida, you got to go in 3 weeks ahead of time. Most of us can't deal with that. So there are just all of these pieces of the puzzle that have got to get sorted out and put in the right places so that cruising can start back up. So my question of the day, and do me a favor, put your answer in the comments or in the, if you're watching it on the replay, do me a favor, put it in the comments. If you're watching live, go ahead and put it in the chat. I see we got several people that are watching it live. I'm glad to have you with us today. But when would you be ready to start cruising again? I'm kind of interested to see. So do me a favor, put the answer in the comments or in the chat so I can take a look at it, and we'll come back to that at the end of the show. One other thing, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, do me a favor, please go ahead and hit subscribe. And if you're enjoying the content, hit the like button as well. From Royal Caribbean, so again, we had news today. They also canceled all the July cruises. So just, and going back to what I was saying, so now Royal, and that's all of Royal's cruise lines, not just Royal Caribbean, but Celebrity as well. I've got that point on another slide. But any of the Royal family are canceled through till August 1st at the earliest. Carnival's August 1st, NCL's August 1st. So it's really taken a toll on the cruising, like I said, up until August at least. And like I said, they're now not announcing for most of the cruise lines ships or itineraries for the month of August. Carnival has, and like I said, I am somewhat questioning whether that's going to happen or not. It's possible they might be able to get enough people in Florida that drive to the ports to make some sailings. I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know what passenger load's going to look like either. Richard Fain from Royal Caribbean made the same point that they're going to ramp up slowly. They'll start with a few ships and gradually expand the number of ships that are sailing. So that makes, it makes it sound like it's going to be slow. And he wasn't willing to make any commitment, even though they announced that they've only canceled through August 1st, or through the end of July, actually, let me say it that way. He said that's as far as they've canceled. But that doesn't mean that more cancellations aren't coming. He wasn't talking very positive about them starting in August, and neither did Frank Del Rio from NCL. Neither of them sounded like they were really expecting to start cruising in August. They just canceled through July, and so they can try to work through that workload. And then I would not be surprised to see all three of them cancel the August cruises as well. And we'll come back to, there was another announcement from Virgin today that I thought was kind of interesting in how far down the road they canceled. Again, I mentioned that no sailing and itinerary information. One thing that he said, and Frank Del Rio talked about some of the same things, is no buffets, social distancing, you may have to wear a mask. Now, we look at mask requirements and we look at how willing people are to ignore those right now. So let's just say that we're still in an environment where wearing masks is important. And you're one of those people that are wearing masks and trying to protect yourself. And you get on a cruise ship and everybody else isn't wearing a mask. That's going to be an uncomfortable feeling. And, what are the cruise lines going to do to enforce it? Are they going to throw everybody in the brig? Because there is a brig on the ship. They have a jail. So are they going to throw everybody in the brig that won't wear a mask? The other question that comes up, and they've talked about, and again, these are questions they're trying to answer right now, is, temperature screening is probably going to be a definite, but they may require vaccination certificates against COVID, assuming we had a vaccination that worked and you could get it. Some of the countries are talking about, like a COVID safe travel passport, some kind of document that indicates that you either have the antibodies already and don't have the virus, or you've been vaccinated, something to that effect. And these are, like I said, they've got to sort through the answers to all of these questions before most people are going to get back on a ship. I see Mary, I'm looking at some of these now, may never cruise again. She's had it due to the inability of the cruise line to make refunds. Yeah, that's been a huge challenge. Cheryl said that she doesn't know when. She's waiting to see when I feel it is safe. A lot of people are feeling that way about cruising. And so it's, and I'm a diehard cruiser, believe me. I would give anything. Well, I wouldn't say give anything. I wouldn't give my life. I wouldn't risk my life. But I would love to be able to get on a cruise ship and go somewhere. I've already had one cruise cancel for the spring that I missed. I have a June cruise that canceled. I had a September cruise that canceled. And right now I have a January cruise booked, and I think their odds are fair that one's going to go. And I'd like to go before then. But again, until we get answers to some questions, the one thing I don't want to be, and I refer back to this, but I don't want to be a passenger on the Diamond Princess where I'm stuck on a ship with a bunch of sick people and no way to get off. And that is probably the biggest question that they're going to have to get an answer to, is if somebody comes down with a COVID virus or whatever virus it is, how are they going to get the sick people off the ship when right now you can't put them off in any port? Their home countries may not take them back. It's a really sad, desperate situation when you get there. Celebrity did the same thing as Royal Caribbean did. I mentioned a little bit earlier. They've canceled all their cruisings through the end of July. And so the one thing that announcement also calls into question is whether or not we're going to have an Alaskan cruise season at all. And if I had to bet, I would bet against there being any Alaska cruises this year. Right now, Disney still has some cruises on the books. Royal Caribbean has some. NCL has cruises to Alaska still on the books. Carnival Princess, though that family has completely canceled basically their entire Alaska season. So, again, you go back to it and you think about it. If we can't start cruising to Alaska until August, we only have 6 weeks of cruise season. So does it make sense to start to try to ramp up travel up there? I was chatting with somebody from Alaska online from one of the cruise ports, and they said that a lot of those stores have already closed for the season. So the people in the ports themselves are basically saying they don't expect a cruise season to happen. So if I had to make a prediction, that's my prediction, and it'll be in video. We can come back and look at it later. But right now, I am thinking that Alaska is probably done for the year. I just don't see any way to make an Alaska season happen. If it does, it'll be just a few ships. But like I said, I don't think it's really going to happen. Disney Cruise Line, they canceled through July as well. That came down today. Now, with Disney, they didn't give any more information on a resumption of cruising. But the one thing I do expect is that with Disney, we quite probably will see a complete resumption when they do resume. In other words, I don't think it'll be one ship and then the other ship comes on later. I suspect just because they have so few ships, I think it's much more likely that they'll all start to go. Pam said she's got a group cruise set for June 2021 to Alaska, and that's cool. It's one of the things you guys can look forward to on the channel is I'm going to get ready to start putting together a series on planning travel to Alaska in general. We'll start with a cruise, but I'm going to come back at some point in time and do land only. We'll probably do cruise tour, and then come back and do land at a later point in time. Alaska is my passion for a place to cruise. I go to the Caribbean and I enjoy it, but if I could only pick one, it'd be back to Alaska. It's kind of like that old song by Johnny Horton, North to Alaska. It is interesting that Disney announced recently they're starting to open up Disney Springs in Orlando. But again, that gives you a sense of where things are, is they're just opening a few of the restaurants and stores in Disney Springs. Nothing so far about the park hotels or when the park's going to open up. So other lines, Virgin Voyages postponed all their cruises till the middle of October. They were supposed to have had their inaugural sailing in April. They were supposed to have I think it was a July birthday sailing for Richard Branson. All of that stuff has gotten scrubbed. And you notice they put it off till mid-October. And I think that's probably much more realistic than August. And they could still slide it downstream a ways. I don't know the answer to that question. But I just thought that was interesting. One piece of interesting news on the good side is American Cruise Line may start to open in June, may start sailing again in June. And they are they run small ships, less than two. They can operate their ships with less than 250 people on board. They cruise close in, so you're in port every day, so they can get people. They don't have to keep sick people on board. But again, they're still facing the same challenge. American Queen Steamboat Company is doing the same thing. But the challenge they have to deal with is the quarantine restrictions. Because, again, if you go somewhere to board and you have to stay in quarantine for 2 weeks, that doesn't work so well. Or what if you go to a port that has a quarantine restriction? Well, you can't get off. So there are still challenges, even though technically they don't fall under the CDC ban, so there's nothing that prevents them from sailing again other than, like I said, things off the ship that they can't control. And so I know they're working on trying to put together itineraries and trying to address these issues. Those will probably be the cruises that become available soonest, or the small ships in the U.S. And then the rest of them, like I said, they're going to wait for a while, I'm afraid. So that's the end of the information I had today. I'm so glad that all of you were here. Again, if you haven't done so, please smash the like. If you're not subscribed, please hit subscribe. And on Monday night, we will have a show. I'm working on getting a guest right now. The one I had scheduled has canceled on me. And I'll get that news out by Monday afternoon at least. So we look forward to seeing you on Monday. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.